If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon, so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. I'm going to preface this Sunday address by pointing out that there will be a brief hiatus for the next few weeks. Most of you who follow me know this already, unless something of particular note or urgency occurs that I feel requires some sort of video essay, then the postings will be put on hold for the time being. Now around here, we don't use terms like taking a break, and God knows I don't say things like taking time off or vacation. I'm a homebody, so at most staycation is about the most adventurous that I get. The enemy doesn't take a break, and neither do we. Just because I'm not lobbing rounds at the enemy right this very moment doesn't mean I'm taking a break or taking time off. In the B1, we don't relax, we reload. And for those who don't listen so well, B1 encompasses the worldwide intelligent black sphere, from New York to Nigeria, from Los Angeles to the Aborigines of Australia, from Jamaica to Jacksonville to Johannesburg. If you're a melanated person within the sound of my voice, and you're dedicated to the destruction of white supremacy and the resurrection and rise of black empowerment, then you are B1, no matter what your particular lineage may be. We represent an oppositional ideology to white supremacy, and we do so proudly and uncompromisingly. This is the time of the year, by the way, when YouTube likes to attack our channels. They like to remove videos, strike accounts, suspend accounts, etc., so just be warned about that. Alright, now that we've gotten the housekeeping squared away, let's get to the subject of this evening address. I would be remiss if I didn't leave you with a few personal thoughts before this hiatus begins. I've often repeated the old saying that the wise talk about ideas, smart people talk about events, and fools talk about other people. So I'm going to be deliberately unspecific because I want you to focus on the idea that we're talking about and not a person in particular. It matters who you get your news and views from. I've said that countless times, mostly in regards to the white media. But the same goes when it comes to us as well. From time to time, you have to review and reevaluate. If someone's on point, you continue with them. But if you find that they're off code, you let them know about it. And if they decide that they're going to remain off code, then you have a decision to make about whether you continue to support them or pay them attention. This is why the whole Essence Fest fiasco was both disgusting but also encouraging in a way, because you had black people who showed that we recognized that we were the power source and that if we chose to, we could pull the plug, if we wanted to. When it comes to our people, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to skilled orators. And likewise, we keep being embarrassed by a number of them. Too many times, the gift of the gab is used in order to promote a grift. Centuries of our voices being stifled has resulted in a people who have achieved excellence in expressing ourselves, particularly on moral issues. But eloquence, indeed being able to give insightful observations on an issue or a number of issues, simply isn't enough for us to give someone our trust. So, what is? The answer? Time. Time reveals all. If someone puts up a good front, they won't be able to keep it up forever. Sooner or later, and it's usually sooner, they're going to pursue whatever their true desire is. If it's to serve and benefit their people, then nothing can deter them from that. On the other hand, if their actual interest is only in serving themselves, then nothing can change that either. The problem isn't that we have slick and clever orators who fool people for a while. The problem is that in too many cases, when these charlatans are revealed for who and what they are, too many of us refuse to acknowledge it. We just don't want to accept it. We just go on with the same old same-o. In a weird kind of way, it becomes like people with political parties or with football teams. They're going to go ahead and back whomever simply because, well, that's their team. They don't really care about whether or not they're doing right. And this is far more important than a game or even an election, what it is that we're doing. Now, one of the best indicators that I've found that someone is a problem is if they got woman issues. When someone keeps being embroiled in persistent scandals and legal issues involving women, that's 3 red flags. A number of individuals come to mind on that particular subject. Off the top of my head, I'd say that Brother Polite is a name that I've heard kicked around on that particular front. Now, that guy was an easy one to spot. He was doing the Hotep hustle, promoting polygamy, and that's another red flag, by the way. Let's be bluntly honest. When someone has multiple wives around them, at best, and I put best in quotations, at best, that man can only claim that he loves one of them, and the others, they're merely live-in concubines. Now, there are those who make the argument that if a man has enough resources that he can make these multiple women satisfied enough to feel that he's providing, quote-unquote, sufficiently for them, and that they don't mind not having sexual exclusivity with them, well, is that really a problem then? Because everybody knows what's going on and they're fine with it. So is it really an issue? Well, my answer to that would be that that kind of situation very rarely happens. What's much more likely to happen is what we see when you look at the Pookies and the Ray Rays who create bastard children. Beware of the loudmouth morons who run around calling themselves alpha males. Think of our grandmaster teachers. Think of our great inventors and freedom fighters and the men of letters and numbers. These were not strutting, self-aggrandizing alpha male peacocks, and yet they were the best and brightest and strongest among us. They were the ones who fought for and established the foundations of knowledge and thought that we inherited and that we struggle to maintain. The only thing the so-called alpha does is to appeal to simple-minded, foolish females who are dumb enough to throw their legs open for these clowns, and then, like two-legged dogs, they go on about their way and foist the responsibility for their children onto better people. We should beware of deceptive modifiers like alpha. It's meant to manufacture the phony idea that there's some sort of fake third category of men, a self-proclaimed superior male. This is what came out of the whole dating coach sphere of the early aughts. Womanizers and philanderers claiming that if they can find some skank to lay up with them, that makes them an alpha. And yet, whenever I look at the individuals who claim to be alphas, first thing I look for is to see what they've built. And I never see anything. They don't create order. But what I do see them produce is usually a bunch of mouths they can't or won't feed. They don't produce communities that are livable. They can't even create a single classroom to educate their own children, much less anyone else's. By letting the lowest common denominator bestow grandiose titles on themselves like that, we also allow them to create space to say that we should take on their problems as our own. These kind of men always expect the rest of the tribe to take care of the bastards they create. Well, I for one have no interest in rewarding the irresponsibility of someone with such clearly defective genes. The self-proclaimed alpha male should have his lineage and legacy end with him, and the stupid females who want to play the whore for him, they should join him. See, there's no such thing as an alpha male. Either one is a man or they're not. Simple as that. By the way, on a side note, I couldn't help but notice that a number of these half-brained alpha dating coach types have been trying to reinvent themselves in the last few years as a bunch of half-baked crypto bros. Andrew Tate comes to mind. Pivoting from pickup artist to crypto bro is pretty seamless. You stand in front of a sports car that you're renting for the day and some girls you're paying to be in your video and you say, "Hey, are you tired of getting rejected? You want to have these girls? Just buy my dating course." And when the pickup artist hustle runs dry, you stand in front of the same rented sports car with the same paid girls, and this time you say, "Tired of the 9 to 5? You want to get this car and these girls? Just buy my crypto coin." Same props, same phony swag, same promise of sex and power, and all false. Uplifting an oppressed people and chasing sex cannot occupy the same space. You can't reconcile the two. Our grandmaster teachers certainly never moved like that. But then again, they were dead serious about what they were doing. A lot of folks who came after them, not so much. You see, the people like Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Dr. Joseph Ben Jochannan, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and others, they began dying out in the 90s. When this happened, it left a void. This is also what happened after the assassination of Dr. King. We had produced a number of honorable and genuine religious leaders who stood for true justice, from Dr. King to Malcolm. We had absolute titans of spirituality, and the government targeted all of them to be killed. And in their place stepped a bunch of pimps and street corner hustlers and other professional BS artists. This is where the degeneration of the black church began, and what had been an honorable institution devolved into a whorehouse, literally, and it hasn't recovered since. Tragically, the same pattern played itself out, at least for a while, where our grandmaster teachers were concerned. When they died, into that void stepped a bunch of weirdos, kooks, superstitious clowns, and outright scammers. And a disproportionate number of them were doing their own pathetic impersonation of our great teachers, but not for the sake of uplifting our people, but instead to finesse some sex for themselves. They would use their shabby little gatherings as nothing more than a way to impress some dusty hood rats or gullible goofy girls and get them some quick and dirty drawers. Emphasis on the dirty part. This went on for several years, and it showed just how lost our people were without the Grandmaster teachers to lead them. And then the new voices of black media began to rise. Led by Generation X, there was a new group of people who had come onto the scene, but they remembered the message of our Grandmaster teachers and were going to remain true to it. It was hard at first. The fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools certainly had us outnumbered. They had a head start, but we had them outclassed. And even though the white media, like the breakfast schlubs and others, wanted to give platforms to these fools, at the end of the day, we reasserted a message of intelligent black discourse that these clowns simply couldn't keep up with. They tried to, some of them. We filled the void that was left by the passing of our Grandmaster teachers, and in the process, we pushed those losers and scammers out. They simply couldn't keep up with what it was that we were doing. And when I say we, that includes you too. Because it's your ears and your eyeballs that everybody's fighting to try to get attention from. So it matters who it is that you listen to. That's the theme of this Sunday address. You see, the reason that we had all of these scammers and idiots and fools who came in making a bunch of noise is because of the fact that nobody was pushing back, at least not from the bottom up. That's what changed when you got on board with the message of the new voices of black media. Now, as far as these old noisemakers are concerned, the problem is that it was very easy to spot the Kundalini kooks and the people who wanted to psychologically masturbate about the greatness of yesteryear. Those guys are pretty easy to spot because they didn't have much to say. But when it came to people who stepped into the socio-political sphere that we were talking about, and they began giving their opinion on that, well, those guys, if they weren't really down for the struggle, they were a little bit harder to spot, precisely because of the fact that they were not obviously manifestly idiots like the Kundalini kooks and the rest of those professional noisemakers. People who can talk a good game, but their internal contradictions inevitably tear them apart, those are hard to see, at least at first. But time will always tell. And just for the record, family, there's no shame in having supported someone because you thought they were on the right track, or because they won your confidence. That's not failure. But what is failure is when you find out what you've been dealing with and continue to support them regardless. Once it becomes clear what someone is about, then you should be ashamed if you don't walk away. I use the alias Professor Black Truth, the operative term there being truth. Why does truth matter? Because truth is reality. Truth is what's real, and we have to live in reality. Well, actually, you don't have to live in the real world, but the problem is you can't live anywhere else. Lies are a problem, not just for honest people, but also for people who value intelligence. Lies manipulate and twist and destroy. They're also a problem because ultimately lies don't work. What happens to all these problem kids, by the way? Individuals who decide that they buy into lies from an early age because it was told to them by somebody who had a little bit of charisma and a little bit of the gift of the gab. In the black community, this is the majority of the people becoming parents now. And what are they teaching their children? What are they preparing their children to do in the world? You already know. They're preparing them to get turned up at the club or to get turned out in the streets or in prison. There's an old saying, history is a lie agreed upon. Well, at least that's what white power is made out of it. I gave you a more practical definition. History is whatever people are told the most often. And that's true. History is whatever passes into popular knowledge. Whatever is repeated the most often is what people remember. And if they don't remember it, then it's as if it never happened. And even if you tell people about it, they'll believe it wasn't very important if you don't mention it very often. Like so much else under white supremacy, that's how things are, but that's not how it has to be. History can be 100% accurate, but in order for that to happen, we have to be 100% honest. The problem isn't history, it's who's telling it. That's the problem. History books written by paid liars who are themselves being paid by the racist power brokers who control the society, they perverted history into nothing more than a justification of all their crimes. To make the depraved satanic carnival we call a society seem like it was inevitable, that things had to turn out this way and couldn't have gone any other way. That's mass mind control. And for those who are skeptical, they also create an associated narrative that things are getting better all the time, that ours is a journey of inevitable progress. The myth of progress is the quintessential American lie. Sure, there are problems, there are things that you can point out that are wrong, lots of things, but you know what? It's better now than it was before. That is a lie that they have been telling for hundreds of years. You point out the racism and the anti-black hate crimes taking place today, and they'll tell you, well, things are better than they were, say, in the 80s when Reagan and his guys were in charge. And in the 1980s, they said, well, things are better than they were when you people were having to protest and having dogs and fire hoses turned on you in the 1960s and 50s. And then in the 1950s and 60s, they said, well, things are better than they were during the race riots of the early 20th century. And then in the early 20th century, they said, well, things are better than they were when you had the night riders and such following Reconstruction. And during Reconstruction, they said, things are better than they were during slavery. And during slavery, they said, you're better off enslaved than you were in Africa. That's the lie that they always tell. It's always better now than it was before. That is the quintessential American lie. As Dr. Claude Anderson and others have taught us, things haven't changed one iota since the plantations. All we have are a handful of compliant bootlicks who white power puts on TV or gives token positions in the government or corporate America. That's it. These are things you already know, and you certainly don't need anybody to tell you that you put no stock whatsoever in the empty mouthpieces on white media cable or their little plantation websites. But just understand that the process of making sure that you properly evaluate who you get your news and views from doesn't just stop there. That's the entire point of this evening address. The bootlicks, shills, and sellouts are easy to spot. But people who are corrupted by other influences, usually their own character flaws, those are harder to spot, and for a lot of us, they're even harder to accept. And that seems to be the stumbling block that so many of us run into. We see what's right in front of us, but we prefer not to, so we try to imagine that what we're clearly seeing simply isn't there. It reminds me of that line from the movie Departed that I've told you about a few times in the past. Martin Sheen is talking to Leonardo DiCaprio, who's supposed to be an undercover cop for the Massachusetts State Police. And during the recruitment process, he says to him, "We practice deception here, but what we don't practice is self-deception." Well, over here in the B1, we don't practice either one of them. We do not practice deceiving others, and we certainly don't practice deceiving ourselves. Don't be afraid to look at things or look at people with new eyes. Regardless of whether or not they were saying things that were good in the past, the question is, are they remaining consistent today? If so, continue with them. If not, make some changes. Because to the people who have trouble distinguishing the difference, you're not supposed to be calling yourself getting too attached to people to begin with. Remember, the code is supposed to be the leader, not any one individual person. This is one of the big mistakes that the civil rights movement made. They decided that they were going to try to create these virtuous cults of personality. It's part of the reason why they got so many of the black leaders killed. They decided that they were going to just basically hitch their wagon to either Malcolm or Martin's star, and they'll go ahead and cheerlead these guys on, and they'll pull that horse to glory. Instead, what happened was they made enormous targets out of black leaders for white supremacy. Decentralized movements. That's what's supposed to actually happen. That way, it doesn't matter what particular person gets killed. You still can't stop the movement because everybody who believes in it has signed on to it. That's the power of a code being the leader and not a person. So please be very careful who you call yourself following behind. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't go putting stock in somebody who decides that they're simply not going to answer yours. Clarity and truth require illumination. As black people, we're going to have to return to our tradition of practicing intellectual and political maturity. We've had a number of times in the past and a number of bad actors in the past who people invested in psychologically and emotionally, and when you find out that this person had feet of clay, or it turned out that this guy wasn't what they claimed to be and clearly they had broken bad, or they were just never good to begin with, black folks didn't sit there living in denial or wallowing in self-pity. Instead, they made the decision, all right, this guy's gone about as far as he's going to go. You see, that's what it was in the old days, and that's why progress was made. So folks are going to have to get out of their feelings and get themselves into the real world. Well, as I said in the beginning, you don't have to. But for the people who refuse to accept that fact, no matter how much you may choose to close your eyes or try to shout down the truth, in the end, the real world isn't going to go away. You will. Good evening, and be one.